Hey everyone, today we will be talking about pelvis bend in the golf swing and what it means to the golfer when looking at their overall performance. Pelvis bend is one of the most important movements for a golfer to perform properly in a functional golf swing. Pelvis bend is the movement of the pelvis throughout their swing in an anterior or posterior movement. Another way that we could say this is if they were to arch their lower backs, that would be more anterior, or tuck their pelvis underneath them, that would be more posterior. The reason why pelvis bend is so important is because it is essentially the control center of everything that happens below it and even above it in the torso. It is one of the main keys to what we call core control in the golf swing. When a player is not able to control their pelvis bend throughout their swing, it can lead to any number of issues, from power production issues to accuracy and even consistency issues. One of the most common swing flaws we see in golf is tied to pelvis bend, and it's when a player loses too much bend too early by thrusting into the golf ball. We call this early extension, and this is a major contributing factor to poor contact and lack of power in the swing. When a golfer is setting up to the ball, we typically want to see pelvis bend in the range of about 17 to 23 degrees, but there are some factors that could affect this, like players' height, arm length, and even club length differences. When we see a player start with too much bend or more than 23 degrees, it can lead to rotation issues due to the fact that their pelvis position has created too much anterior tilt, and thus the lumbar spine will be locked and unable to rotate properly. On the other side of the spectrum, when we see a player have too little bend or too much posterior tilt, we will typically see that player have trouble utilizing the ground and putting pressure into the ground to create proper dynamic movement in the takeaway. Both of these issues can lead to power issues, but too much bend, or S posture as we call it, could also lead to injury. Once a player gets to the top of their swing, we should see a slight decrease to the amount of bend that they had from their address or setup position in an efficient example. The reason we see this is because the player has maintained some core engagement and the pelvis has tucked a little bit more in the backswing. We will commonly see two faults a golfer will make when going into their backswing. One would be trying to maintain too much bend or stay in their posture, and as a result, the player will arch their lower back in their backswing, creating more anterior tilt before they get to the top of their swing. This will not only create speed and rotation issues, but also lead to injury. Conversely, a player may stand up out of their posture and lose a significant amount of bend as a result. This will also lead to speed issues, but can also prohibit the player from making consistent contact with the golf ball. Finally, at impact, a player should have lost most of their bend due to the fact that they have created rotational speed with their pelvis and that the pelvis is more open to the target line at impact. In addition, the player would have fired their glutes to produce more speed that would have more tucking effect on the pelvis, which would then create more loss of bend through impact. Two common faults that we see with pelvis bend at impact is when a player tries to stay in their posture too long and the pelvis bend remains too high. Also, as mentioned earlier, if bend is lost, but because the player stood up to lose that bend, then we would see a lower bend number, but not in an efficient way like we described in an ideal pattern. We can see pelvis bend patterns clearly in the pelvis bend graph, or simply see the values at address, top, and impact in the swing summary. In conclusion, it is hard to have an efficient golf swing with an inefficient pelvis bend movement pattern. Pelvic bend control will affect your ability to produce power, control, and control the low point of the club to deliver solid strikes to create consistency from swing to swing by producing more dominant gross movement patterns.